Hello, friends, and welcome back to the PrepWell podcast. In this week's episode, I want to discuss a recent one-on-one session that I had with a longtime PrepWeller, which happened to be a follow-up session. And I make note of this because follow-up sessions are pretty rare. Most teenagers are not particularly good at following up. I talk to students all the time in private one-on-one sessions, where we go over all of their activities, what they're up to, what they're thinking about doing. And I ask a lot of questions. And we come up with tactical and strategic plans ranging from 3 months to 18 months. And everything sounds hunky-dory. And then I never hear back from them. There's no follow-up. Now, I'm speculating that there are two main reasons why follow-up is so rare. One, the student gets busy and forgets that they even have a plan. Or two, the plan requires too much work. And if the student finds other things that aren't quite as challenging, and there isn't a parent who's on top of this, that's often where it ends. And so when I heard back from this student, who wanted to follow up from our session over the summer, imagine my surprise and delight. This student, whom I'll call Rick and I had a session over the summer, sometime in mid-July, to discuss his extracurricular activities, to discuss what he was thinking about in terms of a major, SAT study strategies, the types of colleges he was targeting, all the things. And I gave him my honest opinion. We identified strengths and weaknesses and priorities and some new ideas, and we came up with a game plan, and boom, he was off to the races. And oftentimes that's where it ends. But not this time. This time, lo and behold, a few weeks into his junior year, Rick actually called to set up a follow-up appointment, to update me on his progress, to get fresh advice and feedback on what he's been up to, so that he can now recommit to an upgraded plan. As you can imagine, this is music to my ears. This is exactly what students should be doing. They should be stopping dead in their tracks in 9th or 10th grade and checking in with a trusted advisor to see how they're doing. Are they on the right track? Are they prioritizing appropriately? Are there any big gaps in their profile? Are they missing something big? And this advisor could be a parent, a mentor, a teacher, a guidance counselor, or a college admissions expert like me. They need to know where they stand in 9th and 10th grade, and then project where they'd like to be in 2 or 3 years, if not 7 to 10 years. Then come up with a plan, do their best to execute that plan, and periodically check in to hold themselves accountable. And of course, in the interim, if they're PrepWellers, like Rick is, they're getting weekly videos from me, giving them nuggets of advice to keep them motivated, to keep them in the know, keep them on track. Now, Rick was following this plan to a T, and I was excited to hear what he was up to. So we got on our Zoom call. We did a quick review of where he was in July, what his plan was, what his goals were. Then he shared with me what he's done to reach those goals over the last few months, and asked what adjustments, if any, I thought he might make going forward. And as you might guess, some things were going well, other things had petered out, and there were plenty of new ideas that cropped up. And it was my job to set him up again for the next 6 or 9 months with a new, upgraded, and clear plan. Not necessarily an easy plan, but a clear plan. We talked about a bunch of things. How he did on the August 27th SAT, and what his plan was to increase those scores a little bit more. We discussed what teachers would be good candidates to ask for letters of recommendation in the spring. We talked about his growing interest in the field of biology and life sciences, and how that seemed to be moving to the top of his list of potential majors in college. All of these things are important to consider when making a plan. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to focus mostly on our conversation about extracurricular activities, good old ECAs. Because after all, your list of ECAs goes a long way in telling your story, in revealing what you care about, your values, how you choose to spend your precious time in high school and the summers, of course. And even though Rick's ECAs won't exactly match yours, most likely, what I'm hoping is that you can take the advice that I'm giving to him and imagine how it might apply to you. Now, just for context, Rick over the summer wasn't really sure what he might want to major in. He seemed to enjoy both humanities and STEM, humanities being reading and writing, STEM being more science, technology, engineering, and math. Well, things have changed a little bit over the last few months, and Rick shared with me that he was leaning towards something in the bio life sciences field. Was he 100% set, gung-ho, no turning back? Not necessarily, but he seemed to be gravitating toward bio and life sciences. Now, this is not a trivial decision. He doesn't have to stick with bio life sciences forever necessarily, but it does to some extent set in motion a process that would give more weight to activities that are aligned with this goal. That's how you build momentum. That's how you build a story. So with this background in mind, I wanted to share a few questions that he asked me and give you my responses. So one question was, should I put piano on my list of activities? Again, for context, Rick plays the piano. He's very good. He's played for many, many years. He's in the district guild for piano players, which shows significant level of accomplishment and dedication, but he's not participating in competitions per se. He's not on his way to local, to state, to regional, or to national fame for piano playing. It's more recreational than anything else. So my response to whether or not piano playing should be one of his top 10 extracurricular activities, the answer was, I'm not sure yet. It really depends on what other activities you have. My gut feeling is that you will have several ECAs that will be more significant than recreational piano playing, but we won't really know until the summer when he starts to fill out his common application. Did I suggest that he drop everything and enter a dozen piano competitions to try to get some objective national ranking? No, it's too late for that. This is going to be a TBD, a to be determined. Rick then asked whether he should list each school club that he was involved in as its own extracurricular activity or put them together all in one. Well, once again, it depends. If he played a significant role in each of the clubs, maybe he was the president or the founder, and the clubs were active and they actually did stuff, then maybe each would warrant its own line item. If a club was aligned with his major preference of bio-life sciences in this case, then maybe there's a case to be made to give each club its own line item. But if he's involved in a bunch of unrelated clubs and has no leadership role and no obvious tie to bio-life sciences, then he may choose to consolidate them into one extracurricular activity. Maybe he calls it active school club participant, something like that, and lists all the clubs that he's been a part of. Let's take a step back and make sure that we're all on the same page here. What Rick is trying to do is to think about what his 10 extracurricular activities will be in 9 months when he has to fill out his common application. This is very smart of him. This is a big lesson in PrepWell Academy. On the Common app, for those of you who don't know, you get 10 spots to fill in your 10 best ECAs. And when the admissions officer reads your application, they will be very interested in these 10 ECAs. They tell a story about you. And by the way, if you chose not to submit an SAT or ACT score, they will be even more interested in these ECAs because you're not giving them much else to work with. So Rick is trying to figure out what those 10 ECAs will be or should be so that he doesn't have too many or not enough, and so that each of the 10 ECAs has maximum impact. And he wants me to help him craft this list. So with this in mind, I had Rick list what he thought his 10 ECAs would be in 9 months, if he had to guess right now. This is a must-do exercise that should be done by every high school student by 10th grade at the latest, because you can't go back in time. You don't want to be surprised the summer after your junior year, when you're applying to college, that you only have 4 things to put down on those 10 lines. You also don't want to realize that you have 20 activities to put down, but they're all very shallow and none of them are particularly compelling, and none of them are aligned with your stated major preference. This move needs to be made now, not later. So good job, Rick. I'm not going to read off all 10 of his proposed activities and go through them in great detail. I'm going to choose a few of them, highlight a few of the notable ones that I think may be of interest. And by the way, these are not going to be necessarily in priority order, as they would be on the actual application. I'm just listing the few that I think would provide the most value to the most people. So here are a few of Rick's proposed ECAs that he wanted to get my opinion on. Number 1, internship. Rick told me that he thought his number 1 ECA would be an internship in the bio-life sciences field that he would get this summer. So I said, oh, okay, just to be clear, you have not yet done this internship, correct? This is TBD. And he said, yes. And I said, this is brilliant. Good job. Well, what does this mean? It means that Rick knows that to beef up his ECA list, having a solid internship in the field that he's interested in would be a good start. So he's putting in a placeholder that we decided to call TBD internship, to be determined internship, that he'll do this summer. This is a masterstroke. Now, he still has to find that internship and actually do it. And he's already made a lot of progress in that regard. He's working with a professor to work out the details. So far, so good. And if he actually makes it happen, and it turns out to be a worthwhile internship, that could easily crack the top 3 activities, if not number 1. So time will tell on that. Number 2, job shadowing. Rick plans to do some job shadowing in the field of bio-life sciences. Awesome. This is straight out of PrepWell lesson number 32. How many students will actually do it? I don't know. But Rick is going for it. Now, I suggested that he try to shadow people with different roles or different functions within the bio-life sciences ecosystem. Maybe he spends a day with a venture capitalist and a different day with a researcher and then a lab technician, then maybe on the clinical side, then a grant writer, and then maybe somebody on the business side of things, maybe somebody in operations. Doing this would give him a great overview of what that industry is all about. And not only would it look like he's been doing his homework, but it might actually give him an idea of what aspect of the field to pursue. So again, this is on the come. This is another TBD. And depending on how well he executes this plan, I could see job shadowing cracking the top 3 activities as well. This is a very meaty, very significant thing to do if you can execute. Okay, next was ski club president. Not sure about this one yet. I like the fact that he's taken a leadership role. That's good. But what exactly does this ski club do? What impact does it have? At this point, I don't know. So I don't know how much weight to give it. Time will tell if it makes it into the top 10 depending on all the others. I'd keep it on the back burner for now. And if it made the list at all, it would probably be in the lower half of the activity list. The next one is freshman baseball. I would give this a pass. It turns out he only played for 1 year, his freshman year, and then never played again. We discussed that there's nothing magical about adding sports to your ECA list. You don't have to have a sport on your list. Colleges don't have some magic trigger that you have to meet when it comes to sports. Unless a sport has been a significant part of your life with a significant duration, at least several years, and you've made it to the varsity level and ideally taken a leadership role like the captain, then don't feel bad about leaving it off. This one, in his case, I'd probably leave off the list, which also leads us to his next proposed activity, which was captain of the varsity badminton team. Now, this is a different story. Badminton is a unique sport. He will have played for 3 years, not 1 year. He's the captain, so he'll get some good credit for that. So I would likely keep it, and it will probably end up somewhere in the middle to the lower half of his list. What about piano? Now, we mentioned this at the top of the episode. I would hold off on this until he's really desperate to fill in some blanks, which I don't recommend either. So let's put that in the holding tank. I think he could probably do better than that. I would leave it on the sidelines. The science fair. This is similar to the internship, meaning that he hasn't done it yet, but he's planning on doing it. Awesome. This could be a great addition to his list, especially if he happens to win a prize or get some kind of recognition from the science fair. Even better would be if he picked a topic in the bio-life sciences field. That would, again, become a piece of evidence to show that he's serious about his interest in bio-life sciences and that he's backing it up with action. He's not just saying it. This sounds pretty promising. Now, depending on his topic and if he gets some kind of an award, this activity, I would say, would move somewhere between 3, 4, 5, and 6, depending on how everything shakes out in the end. Rick then mentioned volunteering at a hospital, which he has not done yet. I'm not so sure that's going to crack the top 10 for Rick. This is volunteering at a hospital. It's very common. It's not overly tough to find a volunteer position in a hospital. As a minor, you can't really do all that much meaningful work in a hospital setting, so I would not waste my time. Thankfully, Rick hasn't done this yet. He was asking whether I thought it would be a good idea to spend meaningful time doing this in the future, and I said no. I think there are much better ways for him to use his time. Again, by thinking about this stuff ahead of time and getting some advice, he's potentially eliminating a lot of time-wasting activities. How about Lifeguard? This is a pretty good one. It's a position that is reputable. Everybody knows what a lifeguard is. There's a good level of responsibility associated with the position. He makes money at the job, which is always nice to show on your activities list. You can make an argument that there's some association with bio-life sciences, given the need to know CPR and first aid and AED use and the like. So there's a bit of alignment there. In the end, I'd probably put it toward the bottom of the list, but I would definitely keep it in the running. How about Eagle Scout, Boy Scouts of America? This should definitely make the list. Eagle Scout, I would say, is a gold standard for an extracurricular activity, almost no matter what your intended major is going to be. It's universally well known and recognized. There's leadership and responsibility involved. There's a long duration involved, often spanning 7, 8, 9 years. Most people know there's a big capstone project that has to be completed. There's interviews and the like. So depending on how the rest of his activities line up, this would probably even be in the top 5. And lastly, reading books related to bio and life sciences. Rick explained to me that he listened to one of my previous podcasts about extracurricular activities and how I mentioned a category of ECAs that I call ongoing ECAs, that students can do on their own time over a longer period of time. So kudos for him for listening and actually engaging in this. So his plan that he's proposing was to read a few books related to bio-life sciences in his spare time. And he was wondering how many books would justify this as a legitimate extracurricular activity. This is a great question. So here's my answer. I'd prefer that he call the activity something along the lines of subject matter expert, bio-life sciences industry. That would be the category name and the position in the activities list. And in the short 150-character description below that, I would write something like, since the COVID pandemic, I've engaged in the following self-directed studies to build my knowledge about bio and life sciences, read industry-leading books, listened to related podcasts, watched over 30 TED Talks, attended symposiums, and took online courses. See additional information. Now, that see additional information directs the admissions officer to the additional information section of the Common App, which is basically an open box that you can fill with anything you want. I would fill that box with a bulletized list of all of the books he's read, of all of the TED Talks and YouTube videos he's watched, of all of the podcasts he follows, all of the symposiums and lectures he's attended, all the online courses he's completed. And if he chips away at these things for the next 10 months and actually does them, this list could become quite impressive. And by the way, as an aside, admissions officers love bullets. They love bullet points. It's easy on their eyes. There's a lot of white space. It's easy for them to digest. And if you can fill that additional information box with a laundry list of things that you've done on your own outside of school that relate directly to your field of interest or major, that's a home run. If Rick could pull that off, I might send this custom extracurricular activity up to probably the top 3. Now, my point going through some of these activities is to give you a flavor of the type of analysis that you should be doing with your prospective list of extracurricular activities. What have you done so far, and what do you plan to do? You should be doing exactly what Rick is doing. If not by yourself or with me, then with someone else. If you haven't done this yet, take out a piece of paper, grab a pen, if you can find one, and make a list from 1 to 10 and start filling out your ECAs. Now, if you're in 9th or 10th grade, there should be a few blanks, if not a lot of blanks. That's okay. You're just starting. That's the whole point. I want you to start thinking about how to fill in those blanks and with what activities down the road. And if you see a bunch of dead weight ECAs that are taking up a lot of your time now with very little future payback, then maybe you scale back on those. By the time Rick and I were done, he had a plan for a world-class ECA list. He cut some things out. He redoubled his effort on other things, like his path to becoming an Eagle Scout, and he created a vision for future ECAs that have not yet even taken form. Now, will he have the time and energy and perseverance to make all of these things happen? I don't know. Maybe I'll do a follow-up next summer and see how much of this plan Rick was actually able to execute. But regardless of how much of this ambitious plan he's able to pull off, he's doing everything in his power to succeed. And what more can you ask for? You can fill in a bunch of blank spaces with a lot of cool sounding stuff a year and 2 years ahead of time. But if you're not willing to spend the time and the energy to make it come true, to follow up, then you're not going to make much progress. In Rick's case, my money's on him. He's shown to be very mature and very engaged in this process and is coming back to learn and adjust and make modifications. If you have not yet done this exercise of listing your prospective top 10 activities, I highly recommend you give it a try. You'll be surprised at what you see or what you don't see. If you're a PrepWeller, you hear from me every week with a call to action to help you make this and many other things a priority. If you are not yet a PrepWeller and you're in 9th or 10th grade, please enroll in the online program. And whether or not you're a PrepWeller, and regardless of your grade, if you want to set up a time to march through your top 10 list, please reach out to me and we'll set something up. Because if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a target, then what are you shooting for? That's all I've got for you today, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for the continued support. If you know a parent with a 7th, 8th, 9th grader, 10th grader, or 11th grader in high school that might find this helpful, please share the episode with them. You can do that by finding that small box with a tiny arrow pointing up. That's the share button. Click that button. Text your friends a link to this episode with a little personal note from you recommending that they give it a listen. Give us a rating, too, if you like what you hear. Apparently, that helps the podcast reach a much wider audience. Of course, if you have questions, comments, or an idea for an upcoming episode, please reach out to me by email, DM me on Instagram, PrepWell_Academy. Check out our blog, Facebook, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from you. Until next week, goodbye, good luck, and never stop preparing. This podcast is brought to you by PrepWell Academy. PrepWell Academy is my one-of-a-kind online mentoring program that delivers to your 9th or 10th grader a short, highly relevant video from me every week, every Sunday in fact, where I give them a heads up about what they should be thinking about to stay ahead of the game. To get these valuable lessons into your child's hands, please head over to PrepWellAcademy.com and enroll your child today.